This year marks the 400th anniversary of the start of American slavery. It was on August 20th, 1619, when the first ship carrying enslaved Africans arrived in the British colony of Virginia. The New York Times Magazine commemorated this important date in history with a major initiative called the 1619 Project. It's a collection of essays, short stories, and poems on how slavery defined life in the United States then and now. Joining me is the New York Times journalist who came up with the idea for the project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, along with Kenyatta Berry, a genealogist and contributor to the 1619 Project. Welcome, both of you, to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Nicole, I'll start with you since this was your idea. And first, let me say, the work is extraordinary. I still am going back, I feel like, over and over again to the things in there and finding new ideas each time. Tell our viewers how you came up with this and why it's important.
So I've been thinking about the year 1619 since I first came across that date in high school. And I was reading a book called Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. And I just remember being shocked that people of African descent had been here that long and that slavery began that long ago, because we were never taught that. And that seemed like a very intentional thing, that we were not taught that we got here even before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. So as the anniversary was approaching, I just kept thinking that this is probably one of the most momentous anniversaries in the history of our country, and most Americans are going to have no idea that this date even exists or that this is something we should acknowledge. And I decided to pitch a project at the Times where we would kind of force that acknowledgement, but also that we would draw the very direct connections between the decision to engage in slavery and modern America, and really make the argument that nothing about our modern society, almost nothing, has been left untouched by that decision.
Yeah, I mean, and that really is, I think, one of the sort of cardinal achievements of this project, is that it shows in so many different ways how slavery continues to influence the way we live now, and that's not an uncontroversial idea. There are a lot of people who want to say, look, that was 400 years ago. We got rid of slavery more than 150 years ago. It doesn't matter. But the work in this project really ties it all together and says, these things we deal with now are about that.
Absolutely. That was very intentional. When I was thinking about this project, I was thinking exactly about that argument that I get on Twitter at least once a week, which is, get over the past, that was a long time ago. And so the magazine is not a history. The magazine is saying you can look at all of these aspects of American life, that some of them which you may think are related to slavery, but many of them that you would have no idea related to slavery, and we can trace it back and show that it is not only linked to slavery, but the ongoing legacy of slavery right now. And that was very important to me, because what I argue is, if you think 1776 is important, even though that was 250 years ago, if you think that the Constitution is important, even though that was drafted in the 1780s, then you can't say that 1619 doesn't matter. You can't say that the 100 years of racial apartheid that followed the end of slavery doesn't matter. We don't get to pick and choose which parts of our history affect us today and which ones don't, and clearly slavery does.
Yeah. And of course, genealogy is a big part of this narrative, of this story.
Yeah, and so what we did with 4 students from Howard University, the law students, was really try to trace their history, their family history, to let them know that you can find your enslaved ancestors, really inspire them. And so one of the things, African American genealogy, we typically think we can't find our ancestors because they were enslaved, and that's not true. It's difficult, for sure, but I think it was really important to have that be a piece and part of this project, and I was excited when Nicole asked me to join it.
Yeah, I'm someone who in the last 5 years has taken more interest in where my family came from, where our name came from in Mississippi, and it is difficult, but as you point out, there are ways to do it, and there are some clues, I guess, that all of us would find sort of in our immediate family?
Yeah, it's important for you to interview your family members, right? One of the things we had the students do is they did an essay and they submitted that to Nicole and to the Times, but we had them fill out an ancestral chart and go back and talk to their family members to fill in those gaps. So it's important to interview your family members. You can get beyond the 1870 brick wall, which 1870 is the first census that enumerated those 4 million, right, that were formerly enslaved.
Right.
You can get through that using the Freedmen's Bureau records and other record sets, voter registrations, different things like that, state census records as well. But it's a long process,
Yeah.
and it can be overwhelming for some people, but it's very inspiring. And I think what I got personally from it was just having the students be inspired, right,
Yeah.
once they learned about their family members. And that brings me joy because it gives me purpose in what I do.
Yeah, one of the things that I have found is that the plantation records for my family are actually kept at Louisiana State University because that's where I guess the plantation. I guess that's where they've kept them forever. But I didn't know that until I went south and started asking questions and found it.
Yeah, so a lot of archives actually do have those records. So I work a lot with the University of Mississippi. They have records. Like you said, Louisiana State University has records. So you will find that people donate the account books.
Right.
Maybe someone went to that university or someone in the family member down the road did that. So you can find that information, but you have to physically go there, like you said. Not everything is online.
Yeah. Nicole, I tell a story a lot about how recently African Americans have had kind of the liberty that we enjoy now, and it's about my dad, who was born in Mississippi in 1933, grows up and joins the Air Force and goes off to fight in the Korean War, and comes home to Mississippi and can't vote. Comes home to Mississippi and can't sit at lunch counters like other people, can't have jobs that other people can have. And again, this is my father. This is one generation removed from me. I think those kinds of stories are lost on a lot of the discussion about slavery and its impact on people today.
Absolutely. In the opening essay that I write for the project, I say, I'm 43 years old and I'm part of the first generation of Black Americans in the history of the country and the U.S. British colonies that made the United States, who were born with full legal rights. So as much as we want to say that was a long time ago, when you consider that the first people of African descent came to Virginia in 1619, and it wasn't until 1968 that Black Americans got full legal citizenship rights, we should not be surprised that we still are grappling with the legacy of this. The legacy is alive. The legacy are our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation, who couldn't partake of things that white immigrants who had come to the country a year earlier could do. That is really part of our desire not to remember this past, to pretend that it was a long time ago, so that we don't actually have to remedy the wrongs that have been done, but also we don't have to acknowledge the hypocrisy at our founding.
You've had an enormous amount of response to this series, I know, but some of it's been pretty negative. There's some real pushback from some high-ranking officials.
Pushback.
Yeah, well, it's kind of it's what they think is real pushback, right? But I wonder what your response is to the claim that somehow this is irrelevant, somehow this is fraudulent to interpret history this way.
That pushback from the far right is the least surprising thing about this project. What's been surprising has been the overwhelming embrace of the project. We have sold out multiple print runs.
I saw pictures of the lines
Exactly.
in New York.
People are in my DMs every day asking how can they get a copy of it. That embrace, kids are learning the curriculum, 1619 project curriculum in schools right now, and school just started. But there was certainly pushback, and I knew that. This was a radical reframing of the origin stories, the mythology we've been taught about America, the mythology of the founders, but also of putting those who have been treated as the bottom and placing them central to the American story, and arguing that I would be foolish not to think when I argue that Black people are the real founding fathers that would not be controversial.
Sure.
Or when I'm arguing, that our founding fathers actually didn't believe in the ideals they wrote because they enslaved 1/5 of the population, but Black people did and fought to make this a democracy. But what people are not able to challenge are the facts.
Yeah.
So they don't have to like the framing. I'm making, this whole project is making an argument, and people
Right.
can disagree with the argument, but they can't dispute the facts. And again, they want to remember parts of our history that they think glorify us.
Yeah.
But if you're going to remember Thomas Jefferson, you have to remember that he enslaved his own children, and you
it's
can't
just-
pretend like that doesn't matter.
It's a real lesson in the idea that the teller matters, right? Who's telling the story of history really matters in terms of what you're hearing and how it's interpreted.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we spent a lot of time making sure that most of the contributors to this project are Black American.
Right.
The writers, the photographers, the poets, the people who created the original artwork, because it was not just about telling the story, but it was about who can tell this story
That's right.
in the New York Times, and that it was so important, not that every person, there were people who were not Black in the project, but that most of that story was coming from us.
coming from us.
But also very, very rigorously researched.
Yeah.
That was also very important.
Yeah. Okay. Well, congratulations on the work. It's extraordinary, as I said, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.